You're visiting the Mom Next Door and our stories of faith. I'm glad you dropped by for a visit. Please stay a while and hear what the Lord has done in the lives of moms just like you and me. Well, it's always a blessing to make new friends, and today's no exception. I've just been getting acquainted with Teresa Janzen, and I think you're going to be encouraged today. Just to kick it off, it's so fun. Where I met Teresa online, and we got chatting that I was from Oregon, and she said her husband's family was from Oregon. And as we chatted more, it turns out that when I was a young mom walking around with a baby in a baby carrier, there was an older man who walked up to me in Goodwill and said, "You're carrying our future generation." And he just continued to pour words of encouragement into me as I was just standing there in Goodwill one evening. And it's so funny. He gave me his business card. It had his name on it. It said Janzen Family Farms or something like that. He invited me to come out and pick strawberries at his farm. That has always stuck in my mind. And so when Teresa said her family was from Oregon, and I immediately connected his last name to her name. And I thought, wouldn't it be crazy? And it was him. Crazy, crazy, crazy. So most of my listeners do know that for 22 years, I lived in the same house in the town that I grew up in. But the Lord just up and moved us 2,000 miles away to Tennessee. And I thought that was like the hugest move that anybody could ever make. But Teresa, you live in two different continents, and I can't even imagine what life like that would be like. So would you just tell me how that happened and a little bit more about your family?
Sure, Pam. Thanks so much. I'm just so delighted to be on your show. And I think that it is amazing, too, that you met my father-in-law in Oregon and you remember that. And I'll tell you, he is definitely a man. He was a man who always left an impression on people wherever he went because he loves people so much. And I'm glad that he spoke life into you that day. Well, yeah, so I did make a huge move. I was born and raised in Michigan, but I had a heart for missions. Even from a very young age, I knew that God was calling me to the mission field as a teenager. And so I went to college to prepare to be a missionary. And I got married pretty young and really had a difficult marriage that eventually ended in divorce. So there's the super summarized version of that story. But eventually, when I was ready to marry again, I met a man also called to the mission field. Now, we each at that time had 4 kids. And so that makes 8. If you're good with math, 4 and 4 is 8. But boy, I tell you, when you blend a family like that, that is a big number. And once our kids were grown, we moved to South Sudan, which is located in East Africa. And so there's a lot of stuff there that you can tell is really huge. Yeah, we combined 2 households, huge households. That process was really something. And then we emptied that incredibly stuffed filled household once our kids were pretty much grown. We had one child who was still a minor when we moved to South Sudan, and she was living with her biological father. That was my youngest daughter, who was still a minor at that time. So it really put us in a unique situation where we had a bunch of young adults entering the world and, still in college, workforce, starting families, all that stuff. And we moved literally to the other side of the planet. And boy, there's a lot that goes with all of that.
What is your age span between your 4 and his 4?
There's 10 years from the top child to the bottom child, and the top one and the bottom one are both mine. And the youngest one was about five maybe when we met, 5 or 6 when we met. And I think she was 6 when we got married. She was about in first grade when we got married. And then we had a whole house full of adolescents at that time. Wow, that is a trying season to try and blend families.
Yeah, I can imagine everybody's kind of got their own groove going. They have their own expectations. By then, they really have their own opinion.
They do. And you know what? The culture of our two families, even though we were both pretty conservative Christian families, the way we had raised our kids to that point was quite different. And so there was this divide between the kids, kind of culturally, if you will,
Yeah.
socially. They
Yeah.
were just really different kids.
Yeah. So now at this point, you have a lot of experience parenting adults. And that's what I want to talk about today. And I was even thinking about that term, parenting adults. I wonder if you've come up with anything better. They're adult
Uh,
children. That's kind of an oxymoron, right? What do we
right.
say?
And
Is there?
I know. Yeah, they're still our kids, even though they're not children, and we're still their parents, even though our job of parenting is kind of finished. The relationship definitely changes very much, but we still have a really important role to play that goes beyond that of a mentor, a guide, a coach, whatever other types of words, even though being a parent of an adult child is very much those things, oftentimes. But the rule book has totally changed. That's the key thing to remember. And it's one of the hardest things to adjust to is the fact that they're not your children. These are grown adult people who are going to make their own choices, and some of them you're not going to like. They're going to maybe even feel free to say things, or they may be afraid to say things that need to be said because of those dynamics. You just have to throw that parenting rule book, if there is such a thing. Honestly, Pam, I don't know that there's a guidebook, but we need a new guidebook once our kids are adults. And yeah, so the language there is really hard. I still say parenting adult children because you're still a parent and they're still your children, even though they're
Yeah.
not children.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think right there is something that as we become the parent of adult children, we find that there's not a rule book and there's not a lot of resources. It kind of feels like we're doing this on our own. And I wonder if you have you noticed that?
Yeah, I really have. In fact, met another woman who also really was passionate about this topic of parenting adult children. And she was a college professor, but would write on this topic. And she started writing on it because she couldn't find any other resources. And that's the same thing for me. It's one of the things that I speak on to groups, and I've written some on the topic of parenting adult children. But mostly it's in the one-on-one conversations that I have with people, and it can pop up anywhere. I have a writers mastermind group that I'm a part of, and we spent a lot of time praying for each other just this past week regarding our relationships with our adult children. And so I know that it is a topic that every parent, if you're not facing it yet, you will in the future. If your kids are still young, just know they're going to grow.
Now, do you have a theory? I have a little bit of a theory as to why this is that there's not a lot of talk and resources. And we do tend to have these conversations one on one as opposed to like somebody having a seminar and saying, come talk about the struggles of adult children. Do you have any ideas as to why there's such a glut in that area?
Yeah, I think this is my feeling. I have not done any research. I haven't even done a Google search on that question, but I do have a theory myself, and I'm curious how it matches up with your theory. A couple of things. One is I hope that people do recognize that there is some anonymity that's required when you're talking about adult children. And when I have written things about my adult children, I run it by them and get their stamp of approval on it because they're grown-ups, and even if your kids are kids, it's still a matter of respect to include them on any public conversation you're going to have. And because oftentimes we're talking about the hard things of parenting adult children, they may not want that stuff aired out there publicly. So then you have two choices. You do it anyway, and that's not very good for relationships, or you respect their feelings about it and you either have to change things enough so that people can't identify them. But honestly, people know who our kids are, right? It's not something that you can hide. So there's no way to really respectfully talk about those conflicts unless they are at a mature enough level to say, yeah, it's okay that you tell that story, share that story with people, but would you do ABC just to protect my reputation and things like that? So that's one of my theories.
Yeah, I think right along lines of that, I agree completely. And it's why when you do have a public platform or a public forum, we may not be able to share everything. I think also God's still writing our children's stories. And yes, even our little children, but for some reason, their stories at their cute, tender ages of preschool, elementary, those things are easier to share because they're kids, right? I
Right.
mean, like you'd go, oh, well, of course they did that stupid thing and they wrote on the wall with a Sharpie marker or they stuck a, popcorn kernel up their nose because they're little like that. They're going
Yes.
to grow out of that, right? But when they become adults, if we're looking at that, we're not saying, oh, they're little, they're going to grow out of that. We're going, excuse me, there's something wrong here. Has anybody not noticed it? Or
Mm.
what are you doing? And there starts to be, you're weighing that out in your mind. Is there something that I did? Is there something
Mhm.
I didn't do? How am I the one to be responsible for the choices and the situation of my child? So that's one thing. The other thing is I think there's so many books out there for parent, like what to expect when you're expecting, the
Mhm.
parenting, the toddlers and all the baby stuff. And I kind of think that everybody's an expert when it comes to that. You've been parenting for 5 years, you're an expert. So you can write a book
Right.
on it, right? And so we feel like we can share the successes. When I look at my 9-year-old, I go, oh, I'm an absolute success. I can tell everybody, how to be an amazing parent. And so I think there's a lot of books out there and resources on those ages and stages of life. But then you fast forward to your children in their 20s, and we're not quite there yet, but in their 30s or whatever. And that is a different unknown territory because those kids have now had a chance to establish their lives, their choices. When they're in our home, to some extent, they maybe comply or mold somewhat to what our expectations as parents are. But then later on, they're like, hey, I am an adult. I am going to make my own choices. So it's just a different stage in the game where if I was to write a book about parenting adults, it may come back on me as showing my own failures, or it may come back on my children as showing inadequacy or judgment. And who wants to be there? Who wants to go there? And so I think that's why it ends up in a lot of one-to-one conversations, which leaves a lot of people, a lot of moms hurting unless they have been so fortunate to run into somebody who is willing to be vulnerable and have that conversation. But it's really hard to start.
It is very hard to start. Pam, you said something that I think is really important conceptually to grasp about this topic. And that's the whole idea that maybe those choices that our kids have made that are not the choices we would have liked them to have made, how it reflects on us as a parent. And there's this delicate balance that has to happen between acknowledging those things that we may have done wrong. I hate that word. We made a choice at the time, and I think every parent tries to make the best choice and do the right thing as they know it at that time. But the very nature of life is that you learn as you progress through life, right? And so
Sure.
when our kids were young, we probably did some things as parents at that time that it's not what we would do today if we had the opportunity to parent them again. But we don't have that opportunity. The stuff that we did when they were young contributed to the person that they become. But when they become adults, they do have choices to make. They take all that information that they received from parents, from school, from society, from YouTube, from Facebook, from TikTok, wherever they're getting stuff poured into their life. And that's really important, the sources of things that poured into their life. The parent has a big part of that, positive and unfortunately, yes, negative. We are not perfect parents. We know that. Okay. But so let's, number one, smear some grace all over this. I believe the moment that you did whatever ABC that you feel like you might have done wrong, that you wish you had done differently, you did what you did at the time because of where you were and what you knew and the tools you had available to you at the time. So let's repent and ask for forgiveness if and when it's appropriate. I think that's one of the key things to parenting adult children is at some point in time saying, I'm sorry. I wish I had done something differently, but you know what? Honestly, I just didn't know anything else to do at that time. That is important if it's going to bring some healing to your relationship and healing to the child, not as a conscience clearer for you as the adult. Okay. If apologizing and acknowledging your wrongdoing brings healing or the hope of healing to the relationship, then you definitely should do that. And then for yourself, though, give yourself some grace. Jesus has covered it, acknowledge it, cover it with grace, and don't continue to feel guilty about it because you are just one of many things that spoke into the life of that child. And you did what you knew to do at the time with the tools you had available. You've learned something now. So now you can do things differently. You can't go back to when they were 12 and you said that really hurtful statement that left a little scar on their self-esteem. But you can say things today that build them up as a person that speaks truth and life into their life. But you can only do that when the relationship is open enough to do it. So the first thing, let's smear some grace on it. You did the best that you could do at the time. And the second thing is acknowledging that they are now, as adults, they're making their own choices. And they're going to do that with the information and the tools that they have available to them at this stage of their life. I hope that makes some sense about that whole thing.
I think that's so good. And as we're raising our children, we do feel the heavy weight that it is 100% what I'm doing, what my husband's doing. Like it all depends on us, and everything that they ever will be will depend on us. And it's so heavy, and God did not intend that for us. And I think it's true. There's a lot of influences that speak in and pour into our children, just as with us, you know. Mm-hmm. Even just popping into my mind that picture of your father-in-law coming to me and speaking truth to me in that store. I've recently interviewed somebody who talked about the importance of even praying for our children, that other people would come alongside them and speak truth to them. And I think about the resources that we provide through their growing up years that will enable that truth to continue to be spoken to them.
I'm glad that you mentioned that, because if someone listening to this show has a relationship that is not currently in a state where you can go and talk to the child about some of these things, maybe even they're not talking, that happens between parents and adult children. And I'll tell you, I talked to a lot of parents, it happens a lot. Yeah. And so as much as you want to speak into their life now, you may not even have the opportunity, and you can't force your way in. You can't force your way through that door. All you can do is leave the door open for when they're ready. And so I think we minimize prayer as the last thing, but it really needs to be the first thing that we do for our kids from the time that they're conceived until the time that we leave this earth, or heaven forbid that they leave this earth, you know. So from beginning to end, we need to keep prayer as the main thing. And I do and have had adult children that what I have prayed is, Lord, bring someone else into this person's life, into my child's life, who is in a position and has the opportunity to speak life into them and to call them back into a relationship that will help to keep that door open and hopefully to reconcile the hurt that has happened.
You know that book, I Will Love You Forever, I'll Like You for Always, you know that one? And the
Mm-hmm.
last page or so of that is mom crawling up on a ladder through her son's window, right? Um, it's earlier where she's holding him and rocking him, and then it gets to the point where she's older and he's holding her. You know, it's so sweet. Doesn't
Yeah.
that always like make you cry? But they obviously had a relationship that was being cultivated and a heart drawn to one another. But when there is that severing and separation, if that mama crawls up that ladder to her son's house, that becomes a problem and a little bit creepy.
Yeah.
So we do need influences, and we need the Lord's help as we work through those relationships for sure.
Right. You know, as much as we would like to say that our children's faith and their life is built on the things that we gave them, there's a scripture in 1 Corinthians 3:11 to 13 that talks about how it is something that we each have to choose as we go. It says, "For no one can lay a foundation other than that which is laid, which is Jesus Christ." So the foundation of whatever we're building is Jesus Christ. And if your children are building their structures on some other foundation, if they have walked away from Jesus and walked away from the things that you taught them, or maybe you didn't know Jesus at the time that you were raising your children and you didn't even help them build that foundation of Jesus, then know that they're building on a shaky foundation. But then it goes on, it says, "Now, if anyone builds on the foundation with gold, silver, precious stones, wood, hay, or straw, each one's work will become manifest." And so think about which of those are good building materials. You don't want to really be building with hay and straw, but again, you're building on some type of foundation, and the only good foundation is Jesus Christ. So, but you're still choosing the materials that you're going to build on. It's another choice. And it says the day will disclose it because it will be revealed by fire. Then it concludes saying that it's each one has been building. And that's what we all do, is we're building a life of some kind with some type of materials. Some of our materials are good and some of our materials are not good, but the foundation is what is important. And at some point in time, each and every person has to choose their foundation, and they may have to begin building again. It's really hard for a parent to sit back and watch as their child's world comes crumbling down because they didn't build on a good foundation or because they didn't build with good materials. But sometimes all you can do is stand back and watch and pray and be available to them when they're ready to begin rebuilding it again.
You know, completely unplanned. However, I think that you're the third or fourth interview in a row that has brought up foundation.
Oh, wow.
And I don't know that I'll end up airing them consecutively. So it depends on how my editing schedule goes. But I think that there's a message here that maybe we need to be listening. The Lord's just bringing that foundation word back over and over again. So I'm kind of thinking I need to do a word study on that. And
Yeah.
the Lord has good things for us there.
Well, I think the family is so foundational. And that's probably why it comes up repeatedly in your topics, is because we're talking about the family. The family is where God designed to be the practice ground, where we have our training wheels on in the family because we have this thing that connects us so tightly to one another. That connection can look very different when our kids grow up. They don't have to be, and they hopefully aren't in our household anymore. Grown kids come back, I'll tell you that.
Yep. Yep.
For lots of different reasons. And sometimes grown kids go far away, and that connection is really it seems severed. And I don't say that it is severed, because there is nothing that will happen that can actually change the fact that they are your child and you are their parent. And I would say that's true for all kinds of families, even if you created your family through adoption or through something else. You, most of the time that connection isn't chosen, but it can be a chosen connection, but it's there. And even if it seems severed, your identity as a parent and their identity as your child doesn't change, even if there's a lot of distance there.
Well, proximity really does change our relationships too. I remember when my oldest daughter, well, yeah, she is my oldest daughter. I remember when my oldest daughter got married, they were moving about half an hour away. I didn't want to be a smother mother and I wanted her to, have her independence. She's a newly married young lady. I also still had uh 8 other children living at home, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
another one was an adult, but I had 7 minors living at home. And then her older big brother was still at home as well. And I told her, you know what, Emma, I want to apologize ahead of time if you feel disconnected and you feel like I am no longer in relationship with you, because I know myself and I know I do very well paying attention to those things that are right under my nose, and the people in my home that have needs and are crying, they're crying, they need their laundry done, give me a glass of milk, whatever. And I do really well with those needs, but you're going to be a half an hour away from me and I'm not going to see you every day. You're not going to be in my face. And I don't want you to feel forgotten. I just get really busy with what's in front of me. And so I really recognized at that point how the relationship does change. And now we have 2 sons still in Oregon. And for a while, our daughter, as they were military, were moving around. Just that physical presence and community really changes things as well.
It does. And, a 30-minute drive away may seem like a long way for some people, and other people will say, oh, I wish my kids were 30 minutes away.
Right.
Or, on 2 different sides of the country, my kids most of the time are 2 days airplane ride away from where I live. Yet I'm so grateful for the technology that we have. And yet I live a really busy life. I'm still at the stage of, I'm working full time and in ministry, which means my job is not a 9 to 5, it's a 24-hour job. And you know what? My kids are in busy seasons of life. They have kids at home. My 34-year-old daughter, she has 2 kids. They're very active. They're in scouts and sports and school, and she's working. And so if I try to call her and she doesn't pick up and doesn't return the call, instead of taking it as an offense and, wow, I wonder, is something wrong? I just remember what my life looked like when I had kids and sports and scouts and all these other things. It's busy, and I don't want to be a burden to her. I want to be a blessing to her. So let's smear a bunch of grace on that.
Mm.
Don't make her feel guilty when you finally get a hold of her. I called you 3 times and you never called me back. Don't you care? Don't you love me? All that stuff. Let's not do that.
Mm.
Just know they're busy, just like you're busy. And we don't always know what's going on in their life. And knowing that as they're geographically different or separate from you, and now socially separate from you as well, they're going to grow and change in ways also that is different. I had this experience at Christmas time, this past Christmas, thinking about, oh, what would my daughters and kids like for Christmas? Well, the ones that I talk to more, I know more about what's going on in their life. The ones who are super busy and in seasons of life where we're not connecting as often, I really don't know. And I hope nobody judges me for this because I really don't know the premise of these movies anymore. But I remember my oldest daughter when she was young, she loved the movie Puss in Boots. And this past Christmas, they came out with a new Puss in Boots. And I was in the United States, I saw a commercial for the new Puss in Boots movie. I have not seen it, don't know if it's good or bad. I'm not making a recommendation. But I thought of her and it brought back memories of her as a little girl. And I thought, oh, I should get movie tickets for her kids. She can take her kids to see Puss in Boots. But you know what? She is a 34-year-old grown woman with her own children, her own ideas. I don't know if she even remembers the fact that she loved Puss in Boots when it came out the first time.
Uh-huh.
And it just really reminded me, wow, what does she like now? And I know she loves fishing. Okay. She lives on the island of Oahu. So it's great that she loves fishing. There's water in every direction. But I don't know a lot about her everyday life other than she's, back in school and focusing on career. And she has these young adolescent kids. What should I get her for Christmas? It's probably not tickets to go see Puss in Boots. She's grown and changed. And so if I don't know, next time I talk to her, I'm going to ask, hey, so what are you into lately?
That kind of beckons back to the conversation before of maybe why it's hard to talk about our adult children, because I think there's so much of our identity as moms is being in tune with our children and knowing them, studying them, and really, because we live life with them, we know what
Yeah.
makes them tick. And when we step out those many years later and there is that separation and we don't have those answers, if it was meant to or not, I think we kind of feel some mom guilt about that. Like, well, I don't really know my kids anymore. And
Right.
it's not that you've been avoiding them, you're just allowing them the freedom to be adults.
Mhm.
And that's just the next step. It's just so hard to adjust to.
It is. It is. And again, the topic of grace, that's a big theme of mine because that guilt does not do any relationship any good. And oftentimes it can flavor the communication that we do have. If I'm feeling guilty because I don't know what she wants for Christmas, it's not going to help us, our conversation, unless I am willing to say, hey, I know you're super busy. I'm busy too. We're adults in our own life. Why don't we just talk a little bit about what you like or what you want to do? And or this is where I used to say I would never give gift cards. I give a lot of gift cards now and let them pick out what they want. And it's not because I don't care or it's the easy way out. It's because I want to be a blessing to them and not a guilt trip. I don't want them to feel bad about our communication. I want them to feel really good when we're able to communicate. I don't want them to experience guilt any more than I enjoy experiencing guilt. I don't like it. Lots of grace here.
Right. Well, those who are on my mailing list might have gotten a little hint in their inbox in October. I will do this probably every October because I do it in my home. Years and years ago, I created a little family survey of preferences. It asks, like, what's your favorite color? What's your favorite kind of potato chip or sweet snack or salty snack? Or what are your favorite stores? What book do you really want to read this year? And just a bunch of questions like that. I also have, what size shoe do you wear? What's your, shirt size?
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. And so every year in October, I print those off for the ones in my home and I email it to my, a fillable copy to my adult children. And I'm like, I need your help because there's
Yeah.
so much to keep track of. And then I keep those in a binder. And when I go shopping or when I plan out my things, I'm able to refer to that. Even this year, one of the aunties said, what's this one or that one's? What's their favorite candy? I want to just send them a candy bar.
Oh,
And
that's
so,
great.
yeah, so I was able to go through and I knew exactly. And when my kids opened it, they're like, how did Aunt Trisha know that I liked Sour Patch Kids? And I thought, well, it's because I used my little hint packet. And when they're young, what's fun is that those are like memories, right? So I can pull back those papers from 12 years ago and I see their little handwriting and the things that were important to them. And so they became kind of treasury things for me. I love doing that.
Oh, Pam, that's wonderful. I might have to be on your mailing list. I think I will, just so I can get a copy of that. I
I
think that's
know.
amazing. And it also really helps because guess what comes with grown kids? New relationships, new people in your family. You get son-in-laws and daughter-in-laws and serious boyfriends and girlfriends come in and out of their life and that's a big part of their life and even grandkids. And boy, I'll tell you, grandkids grow and change faster than you can whatever. I don't know. I'm pick a good idiom to stick in there, but
Right.
they grow fast and they change fast. Much that process of grandkids growing up happens, it seems much faster than your own kids growing up. Do you know I have 12 grandchildren now and we
Wow.
are expecting one more any minute.
Oh, that's exciting. That's exciting. Well, grandparenting is a fun journey as well. And, even when I look at my mom and my mother-in-law, they're great grandmas now. Going back to that little gift idea, you go, well, what do they need? What can I give them? And the
Mm.
relationship between me and them. And I think that we all kind of, as we age, we get to the stage of not wanting any more stuff.
Right.
Um, those little questionnaires that I send out, the grandmas love that because that's almost like a gift. They get to have a glimpse into the grandkids' life, their great grandkids' life, and just reading those is kind of entertainment and fun.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, because it's such a hard topic to get into, it's hard to open up that door and talk about our adult children. I wonder if you have any ideas or tips of ways to enter that relationship and into that, I mean, I guess that vulnerable state with other women. How can we support one another in that stage of life?
I think again, it comes down to conversations when we are talking about our grown kids or our kids in general. I don't think that this necessarily changes, but it does become significantly more important as they're adults to really be respectful. And if at all possible, if you have to, if you talk about your kids, do it in a way that keeps them safe and protects their reputation and their feelings. And you could do that if you feel like you really need to enter a conversation about a problem you're having. You can do a third person. I have a friend who I don't consider that insincere or dishonest to protect your child in that way, especially if people know your kids. And then also sharing safe spaces, just being really smart about who you do talk to and who you don't talk to. There are some people that these are not the people that you'd need to go to for advice. And if someone else talks to you, keeping confidence, that is super important. And I think also acknowledging and allowing our kids to not only own their own problems and choices, but to let them also own their own successes. How many times is it tempting to see an adult children achieve some wonderful milestone in their life and they're acknowledged and we feel proud. Now, are we proud of our great parenting skills or all the things we did to speak into their life? Okay, that is fair enough. But just like we have to give grace for not being responsible for everything they do wrong, guess what? We weren't the ones who achieved that great milestone. Let them own it. Don't steal the spotlight off from them. Be proud of them for being the person that they are and how God has been working into their life. Don't claim the glory any more than you claim the guilt, and
Mm.
let them shine. And I think our grown kids then will feel confident in who they are and the choices that they're making for the good things. And then hopefully they get to the point of being responsible and acknowledging the things that maybe they need to change in their life. I am amazed at so many of my grown kids and I had 4 girls and then I married a husband with 2 girls, 2 boys. Okay. So
Okay.
when I say my daughters, I'm thinking about my biological children, and that relationship is a bit different, but they have become incredible parents. And I sit there and I say, where did they learn that? Because I wasn't that good. No, yeah, they do some things differently than how I did, and maybe even how I would today. But for the most part, the emotional intelligence that my children have, I don't know where they got it because I think I was so emotionally unintelligent when I
Mhm.
was raising them. And it gives me real hope for the next generation. And they are raising kids in a really, really difficult time. I am really glad that my kids are grown with the legislation that is being passed in states all over the country. And so now, how can I, as a parent of an adult, support my kids on that really difficult journey, giving them credit for the things that they have figured out on their own, and maybe the things that they learned from my mistakes? I can be really glad that they learned things from my mistakes. There's a whole lot of stuff about that, but I think really just looking at them as grown human beings who are making their own choices, good, bad, and otherwise, and being respectful of the opportunity you have to speak into their life, and being respectful when you seek advice from other people.
That's gold. That is just rich right there. Such good advice. Thank you so much. Now, when I was doing a little research on you, I heard you have a prayer guide that's available for your email list. Tell me about your prayer guide. And then I also want to ask you about a few of your books.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I do have a prayer guide. I'll get you a link to it so that people can find that in the show notes. And it's just a little mini devotional for parents of adult children to help people process that relationship. And I can speak in generalizations and I can speak from my own experience, but each and every parent, adult, child relationship is so individual. So people really need to pray and meditate and figure out what's going to work in their situation, because they have a unique history and style to that relationship. I have written on the topics that we've talked about oftentimes in devotionals, and I've contributed to a number of different devotionals. They're all on my website at teresajanzen.com. A lot of them are devotionals that I have been a contributor to and not written the whole devotional. And oftentimes, though, these topics that we've talked about come up because my kids continue to be a big part of my life, even though they're not kids anymore. They're still very, very significant relationships in my life. And they were significant lessons that God taught me spiritually through my relationship with my kids. I wrote one children's book so far. I've written one. I think I'll do more because that one happened to win the 2022 Children's Book of the Year for the Golden Scroll Awards. And I was really excited about that. But it's about the topic of vulnerable children. And children all around the world become vulnerable for a lot of different reasons. And why a children's book when you're talking about vulnerable children today? Kids really do have a lot of empathy and a lot of knowledge about what's going on around the world, and we can't put them in a bubble. What we can do is give them the tools that they need to enter into conversations and healthy feelings about some of the hard things that happen in the world. And the book is written in such a way that you could read the story to a 3-year-old and they're going to hear a little story about a mango who goes on a bunch of unfortunate adventures, but has a happy ending. The book is called Little Mango in a Big World. And it's really talking about kids who end up in the world too soon before they're adults. They could be homeless. They could be uncared for in the home, but so they're really on their own a lot. They could be displaced with their parents due to politics or economics or addictions, whatever the reasons. So this little mango ends up in the world too soon. But there's other social issues that are discussed there too, like bullying, judging people based on their appearances, and how you can step into someone's life and affirm them, and how when we nurture a child with all of the things that they need, then they can grow and really change the world. Every single child, regardless of the circumstances into which they were born or are currently living, God created them with an incredible amount of potential, but they need to be nurtured in order to achieve that potential. You know, just like a mango that falls out of the tree, if it sits on the side of the road and rots, it just becomes a rotten mango. But if the mango is planted and that new tree is tended and cared for, it can grow into a tree that bears fruit and continues to change the world. And so that's kind of the premise of the book. It's written for ages, brand new, all the way up to 100 plus. And the more a mature person is, the more they'll get from the story. And there's discussion questions in the back and some mango tree facts, so that families that want to have a conversation about the social issues discussed in the book, they can, and it'll be very much age appropriate.
Yes, this book is so masterfully done. My granddaughter keeps bringing it to me. I haven't had the time to sit down and read it to her yet, and I kind of think that is on my list as soon as I walk out the door. Is I'm reading Little Mango in a Big World to my granddaughter.
Oh,
So,
wonderful. I've had grandparents who have told me their 3-year-olds love it. Their 12-year-olds, that's a tough age to read a picture book to a 12-year-old. But
yeah.
I've had more than one grandparent and more than one parent who has told me that with that adolescent age, it's a super conversation starter, but be prepared for a long conversation. And you don't know where it's going to go, because it leaves a lot of opportunity for interpretation, and it can bring up topics that are on that child's mind.
I agree. So, how can people find you?
Well, teresajanzen.com is kind of the central point for that, but you have to remember my Janzen is spelt with a Z, which in Oregon is really common, but in Michigan, where I am, is not common. So Teresa, as it's spelled phonetically, Teresa, Janzen with a Z.com, and you'll connect to all my social media, including the Radical Abundance podcast and the YouTube channel. And on the YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/Teresa Janzen, there is a playlist on there for parents of adults. Now, some of those shows are a little bit older. And what I have done is, when I have done a show that addresses topics I think are relevant to parents of adults, I've just added it to that playlist. And so it could be branded in a number of different ways, but that is a resource for people.
Oh, good. Thank you so much. And I will be putting those in the show notes. So that's just a click away for the listeners. And I wonder if you would just close us out in a word of prayer today.
Yes, thank you. Father God, I just thank you for giving us the opportunity to raise the people that you have created, these children that you knit together in the womb to grow and become instruments of your kingdom building activities in the world. Father, thank you for that heavy privilege of parenting them as children, and then also for the honor we have of being in relationship with them as they continue into adulthood. Father God, I just pray a prayer of comfort and encouragement over people who are listening today who maybe feel a little bit of guilt about things that have gone on in the past. Lord, help them see your mercy and the grace that you have put on their life. And Lord, for those who are still parenting young ones, just help them to know they're not going to do it perfectly, but they are covered again by your grace. Thank you so much for the grace you've given us and the same grace that you extend to our adult children. Lord, help us to be faithful friends to those kids as our relationships change, and help us to speak truth and life and love into their hearts and minds and families. And Lord, bring along someone else who will speak into their life if we don't have the opportunity to do that. We want to praise and glorify you in all that we say and do, and especially in these special relationships that you have put in our life. We thank you, Lord, for the job you have given us of parenting our adult children and our little ones too. In the name of Jesus, I pray. Amen.
Amen. Thanks for being here with us. We'll see y'all next week. Bye-bye. I hope that you've been encouraged or challenged in your faith today, and that something we discussed prompts you to grow deeper in your walk with the Lord. If it has, make sure you tell a friend so they can grow along with you. And if you or a friend would like to be a guest and share about God's faithfulness in your life, please email me at podcast@tendingfields.net. Because when we tell of God's faithfulness, we never run out of stories.
Whatever is true, whatever is noble, think on these things.